Hello everyone, my name is Onepeg, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Girls of Tarkov podcast, where once again, Irina Shoro, Sheena 4, and Renaki, 3 Russian female streamers, had Nikita on their podcast to talk about things related to Tarkov. Primarily, the conversation was around streets. So for those of you looking for a TLDR, there isn't a whole lot of new information. It's kind of shoring up some of the finer details of what we can expect when it comes to streets, and there is this one other caveat of there being a cat in the hideout at some point. But anyway, yeah, let's talk about the podcast. So in here, there's a bunch of different pieces of Q&A. I've gone through this in pretty good detail. I'm going to try and summarize it as best I can so that you guys don't end up getting bored to tears. In terms of what to expect from Streets and its first iteration, as we know, Streets is going to be just a piece of Streets. It's not going to be the entire Streets location. They asked if Suburbs was going to be rolled into this. It's not. It's going to be on a DLC. Also, they said something about, or Nikita had said something about how there was one building, for example, that had 15 scavs inside of it just by itself. So there's a desire to need an awful lot of entity count on something like Streets, but they are piloting, I guess, some crazy new optimizations that they're doing to be able to make the map flow well. And as Nikita said, have it be better in frame rate than Lighthouse, which I would hope so, considering that Lighthouse is the worst FPS of all of the maps right now. He then went on to say that for full implementation, they want 100 entities allowed in a certain geographical region. Right now, I would say there's probably 30 to 35 entities on any one given map at any one given time, which means that they're looking to have a 3x count in the number of entities at minimum. And remember, Nikita said something along the lines of 30 to 40 PMCs, just PMCs, not including player scavs, bosses, you name it. So that is obviously very ambitious. He said in the first iteration, this would not be the case, but they look at getting there eventually. Insofar as bosses and raiders and whatnot in the BTR, bosses are not going to be in this iteration of Streets. There will be no bosses on the map right now. Possibly, obviously, they're going to add them later, but we don't exactly know when. Will it be possible for raiders to ride in the BTR? Raiders riding in the BTR is something that Nikita said he would consider, but they obviously want to make sure it makes sense. But again, he said the mechanics that they use to optimize Streets will be used in the future on other locations, which will greatly increase performance. In terms of being able to break walls, the breakable wall that we saw in the trailer, you know, that same one that had the BTR in it that we're not going to see, at least in this iteration of Streets. The breakable walls are supposed to be in Streets. Whether or not they're going to break just from any old explosion as a check, or whether or not they're going to have hit points, like they could have a certain amount of life or health associated with them, where maybe it takes multiple grenades to break them down, would be kind of cool. He said that they're kind of toying with both of those, but breakable surfaces will be in the game when Streets releases. Will it be possible to crawl through the ventilation systems? Nikita gave an interesting answer to this, which makes me think that it would potentially be possible to have vents that we would potentially be able to crawl through. He said that he had a hand, or his hands were directly in making customs. He knew every inch of customs when customs was originally built because he was the one that built it. In the case of Streets and Lighthouse and Reserve, he didn't have a hand in building those. They were built by a team of level designers. So in those cases, he doesn't know all the little details. In the case of Streets, he also doesn't know all of the little details. And that is by design. According to him, much like how he preaches for all of us, he believes in discovery, so he would rather have those maps built out in a way where he's discovering new things associated with them when he's either consuming content or when he's playing it himself, although I know there's going to be a bunch of jokes in the comments about Nikita doesn't play the game. I get it. But in this case, it looks like this is something that he doesn't really know because he chose not to. So I find that to be an interesting answer, which also makes me believe that there's probably ventilation systems that we'll be able to crawl through. So hopefully that would be really cool. I'd be looking forward to the different like angles and flanks and stuff that you'd be able to do by sneaking through vents. I think that would be cool. Once upon a time, there was the idea where we were going to have a flare gun for like leaving maps, for instance, with a helicopter pickup, let's say. That never got implemented, although it was something that they had wanted to do. It still isn't in the game, which came to a question about exit mechanics and will we have to do special things in order to be able to get out. Nikita said that he wants to move to a system where you would have to do something special, like unlock something or pull a switch, whatever, in order to be able to get out, much like the more complicated extract spots. There would have to be some amount of interactivity in order to open a door or whatever whatever in order to be able to leave, not just getting into a certain zonal area and then you just kind of disappear. In this iteration, it's going to be a standard exit like that, but there will be different options in the future, like a flare gun. So right now, it's just kind of get to a certain door or whatever, certain spot, and you'll just leave. So in terms of other physics stuff, the question of like deforming walls and punching bags around and books flying off of shelves and whatnot, which we again saw in the trailer, that is something that they may be turning off when we get to the point with Streets releasing. He doesn't know whether or not it's going to be off or on. My guess is it's going to come down to performance and optimization and server performance, because you have to mark locations for everyone simultaneously if you blow a trash bag sideways. And we already know that certain entities, when it comes to client side and where things end up, isn't uniform. So we'll have to see. Another interesting mechanic that Nikita said that he was looking to add is the ability to punch in like coded panels. They've had models, they have finished models of code panels for us to have to put in randomly generated codes. The idea being that somewhere on a map, you might have to find like a pin number or some type of alphanumeric key code in order to be able to enter it in on a door in order to access a certain spot on one of these locations. It's something that they've been planning for a long time, but it hasn't been implemented, but they want to integrate it into the game in the future. Something interesting about labs is the lab location going to be available or not on the map where the map is displayed. The lab location will disappear from the map selection menu. The location will need to be accessed through other locations. There's no word here whether or not it's going to be immediate when Streets releases or if it's going to be delayed and it's a later thing down the line. He didn't elaborate, so we don't really know. And obviously this would require some type of exfil and infill system, meaning that you're going to go through some kind of zone wall transfer from the Streets server into labs. And the number of people being able to transfer into labs is going to be obviously finite, because you can't allow too many people in there, otherwise it'll be overkill, like 20 people on there at once. Nikita said that in here. And the other thing that Nikita said is the current infill system and the current exfil system in Tarkov is temporary. They look like they're still planning on going forward with this open world concept, which I find to be incredibly interesting. On the roofs of each building, Nikita said that they're not going to be accessible by PMCs. There will be sniper NPCs on top of these roofs, but we as players will not be able to go on the roofs. The reason for this is because of the amount of culling that gets done. If you remember, if you guys are OG enough to remember the ability to scale some invisible stuff to get onto the roof of interchange, in certain spots on that roof, if you stood back far enough, the game would remark you as being indoors and the entire outside area would cull itself, because now you have to worry about geometric objects inside. If you then took a few steps forward, it would remark you as being outdoors and then the outside would re-render. That is what's called culling. It removes those things from VRAM for you to be able to focus more on what's in your immediate area instead of rendering the entire map, which obviously costs frames. In the case of the roofs of the city, it would be the same type of scenario. If you walk indoors, certain parts of the surrounding area don't need to be rendered anymore, so they de-render stuff unless you're able to see it like through, around a window, etc. He said that for the time being, you won't be able to get on roofs. It's very possible that they will end up having a roofline vista of some kind that we'll be able to get up to at some point in the future, but for now, no. There was then a question about whether or not you could use a grappling hook, and he kind of chuckled and said, what about an ability to grab and ride a sled too? And then ended up having an analogy about, you know, we built a plane and then somebody suggesting putting another engine in the body of the plane. He said they have to draw the line someplace. It's an interesting idea, but it's not something that they're going to bother toying with in the time being. And then went on to talking about networking, saying that the network code, the net code of the game being where it is right now is better than it's ever been. But if they wanted to make it really, really good, they'd have to go back and rewrite it all from scratch, which would take a half a year and then another 2 years to test. So it's something that they're working on, but they're not going to be touching a grappling hook, I guess. In terms of Arena, he said that Arena is in a good spot. They've outsourced, contracted out the development of Arena, but obviously EFT's core team is going to have to take a close look at it to work out any kind of bugs or whatever. There's going to be the ability to have solos, 1v1s in Arena, but he said it would be a special game mode, so something like an offline mode, I would assume, private lobbies, that kind of stuff. In terms of weapon presets, he said that that's something that they planned on. They even planned on an upvote system for presets, like if you make a good preset and you post it, you have a public ability to be able to share that, and and then other people can upvote your build to say it's awesome or not. And then harkening back to the original trailer of Tarkov, there was this slow door opening with holding a gun barrel kind of like in the door jamb as it opened. That's something that isn't in the game, obviously, now, but it is something that they plan on doing later. It's not going to be in this iteration of the game. Probably a DLC release of some kind. They also asked about being able to shoot from supine, meaning like instead of being on your stomach, you turn to your back and shoot down your feet instead of shooting in front of your face. He said that it's in the plan, but it's obviously not here yet. Will there ever be like a dust coming off of the ground thing as you go to stand up? He said, why not? We'll add it. So depends on how cartoony they decide that they're going to make this. It's going to be something that they're going to have to also make appropriate depending on the surface that you're laying on for people not to gripe. But I think that wouldn't be a bad idea. Are there plans to allow players to use repair kits in a raid? He said, no, full-fledged repairs are not going to be possible. But the idea of having removable plates and whatnot for your plate rig, you could bring backup plates, pull the Velcro, take the old beat up plate out when we get custom rigs, and put a new plate in its place. In terms of expanded statistics, like if you hit a player for a certain amount of damage or they hit you for a certain amount of damage, or whether or not they'd be able to have that in the future for maybe even overall stats for damage done on each map, etc., etc. You know, all the details that we all would love to see that we don't get right now. Nikita said that he possibly would add that in the future. He's not sure. And then the question, one of the questions that comes up very, very often is whether or not we'll be able to get feedback on the player reports that we make. He said yes. Now, I want to make this very clear. We have been begging for the ability to get feedback on whether or not we make a player report, like somebody's cheating, we make a player report. Could we get feedback on that? And he said, has been saying now for the last couple of months, yes, it's being worked on. This will be a system message in-game. He says he doesn't know the current status of that task. Right now, our heads are busy with doing other things, but they have been working on. So a feedback system is coming for player reports. Pretty cool. And I just want to go on, I just want to say one other thing here. That for peace of mind is something that I would consider to be not just nice, but almost necessary, because I feel like that gives us a little bit of solace in knowing that there is action being taken on the player reports for the cheating that we find. Knowing that they are, or believing that they're cheating and then having that validated through a feedback system goes an awful long way toward people's morale, and it goes an awful long way toward our confidence in whether or not the devs and the anti-cheat are doing something effectively. They asked him about events in the past, which one was his favorite, or does he like the fun and relaxed ones, or does he like the more hardcore ones? Now, we already know what Nikita's going to say. He loves the hardcore, baby. He wants it to hurt. He's a sadist. He loves hurting people. It's in his blood. He knows that. He said he doesn't like the simple events that change just a couple of parameters that don't fundamentally move the gameplay. He said that they're necessary. They're good to have just as time sinks. You know, something like, all right, cool, let's play. Let's check this out. Let's see what this feels like. Just out of the curiosity play. Do you have a dream to implement any cool new events? He said, of course I do. Events that change the game, stuff that changes the season, things that add new characters. He said that they have a lot of ideas that they're working on, and he specifically mentioned the ARG that we ended up being very, very much a part of with Noise Guy and his community, which made us part of the lore, which was ridiculous. He said that they want to make those, like that bottle event with the ARG, on a larger scale. And he said, so stay tuned, it'll be cool. And then there was a question about like loot stashes, like being able to find during the Halloween event, we could find a pumpkin with like special stuff inside of it. He said that you could expect to see more events like that, like the unique flare gun cartridge that would make scavs be your friend. There was like a poison green colored flare was the name of it, and you had the ability to, if you used a flare gun, you could fire it into the air, and then scavs for a little while, including bosses, would be your friend. They would come and help you. Like that unique flare gun cartridge is still, according to Nikita, is still in the game and can be found. So it's not just those Halloween items didn't all go away. That flare is still in the game, can be found and used. He also then said something about like Tagilla's weapons being that the two-handed hammer can't be held or used. He's thinking about whether or not like a max strength perk would allow you to be able to use the two-handed melee weapon, but you'd have to do something first, obviously, probably some crazy stretch goal task or something to unlock the ability to wield it. But still, that would be pretty cool. And then obviously the big question, what changes in general are planned for the Hideout? Maybe some new modules? We already know that they're planning on the gym, this Pump Like Tagilla event thing that they were pushing on socials that still hasn't shown up yet. And he said, and remember the idea of having a cat in the Hideout? It's become a full-fledged task. It will be done someday. Cat in the Hideout. That's what we're gonna get. Nice. What about dogs, man? What about Arnie? I've been asking since 2018 if I could have my dog in the Hideout on the couch. Well, what about the good boys? No good boys? I know. I'm doing the what about thing. I know. I'm sorry. Nikita, your game's great. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to yuck your yum. Cat lovers unite. I have cats too. I just want a puppo. That's all. I like my puppo. He also ended up going on to say in the next major patch, we're going to have more options to be able to modify offline mode Tarkov where, we can invite our friends, but it's kind of just like bots or whatever. There's going to be new settings, things like weather, bot settings, HP for PMCs. There's going to be a lot more stuff that you can tweak and mess with in offline mode, including the ability to have some type of spectator camera, but he's not sure if some of this is going to make it into the next patch or not. The question was then asked whether or not there would be a thing like a master key for labs or a skeleton key of some kind, and he said that they originally planned for the black key card to be a master key for labs, but it obviously didn't go that way. But they're still working on a master key of some type. They're planning on it. That's going to have an amount of durability that will be able to open any door, at least in labs, let's say. And then the last couple of interesting details that they're looking at adding. The first is they've already fleshed out an animation for the ability for like a PMC, for instance, to lie down on the couch in the Hideout, like an animation for that where they could lie down and just chill. They haven't added it yet because they haven't had time. Obviously, all of this stuff comes with bug fixes. And then the last question, if you could go back in time, would you make the game differently? And he basically said no. 95% of the stuff that's in the game right now, he would have left it the way that it is. He wouldn't change a thing. He thinks that 95% of what's in the game is just the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to assume that the other 5% is the current audio iteration and the netcode, I guess. Anyway, guys, that's what I have. Thanks so much for coming and checking me out. Arnie's over here shaking himself off. He's ready to go somewhere. We're gonna scoot. Thank you so much for coming and checking me out. If you would be so kind as to follow me on my socials at OnePegMG on Twitter, at OnePeg on TikTok, where once I figure out the audio issue that I've got, will be streaming simultaneously on TikTok and twitch.tv/OnePeg, where I am live every day around 5 to 6 a.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, I'm going to be live playing the heck out of the Callisto Protocol, so please come and check me out there. I'm going to be live for a very long time tomorrow playing my way through that game. I can't wait. I'm so stoked. And as always, if you would be so kind as to sub me here, I would love you very much for it. We're almost at 100,000. I can't even believe it. That's so crazy. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.